Senior Bowl practices are in the books, and plenty of prospects stood out during the week of practice. So, which prospects impressed enough to potentially become Indianapolis Colts? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Fan Nation on SI.com, part of the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Andrew Moore, and as always, I'm joined here by my co host and fellow analyst at Horseshoe Huddle, Drake Wally. Drake, there was a lot of guys that stood out in the Senior Bowl. I feel like if we talked about every single one of them, we would end up being here for two and a half hours. It'd be a really long episode tonight. But the Colts definitely, like we said, they take this event very seriously. Chris Ballard was down there. Shane Steichen was down there. Ed Dodds, the assistant GM, down there, plus a contingency of scouts for the Indianapolis Colts. This is a big event, and some guys that we had talked about on Monday as being potential targets, they started to stand out and possibly stated their case for becoming Indianapolis Colts here come April.
Yeah, and look, the big dogs were there. I mean, we saw the pictures of Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard standing shoulder to shoulder. Ed Dodds was pretty much right there next to him. I mean, these guys are honed the hell in. They understand that not only is this a tradition for the Indianapolis Colts to pick so many of their players from the Senior Bowl, but there was so much talent out there, and certain guys that we will talk about. Now, obviously, some kind of underperform, but that's always going to happen. But the ones we're going to talk about today, not only did they stand out, but they are potentially realistic guys that could be with the Indianapolis Colts. We're not just talking about, guys that are totally out of the ballpark for the Colts to pick. We're talking about guys that actually fit what the Colts are trying to plug up and depth and potential starters and all that stuff. So it was honestly a pretty awesome Senior Bowl, and it was kind of nice to watch it and not have to watch the quarterbacks or pay any attention to the passers.
Right. I mean, hey, as a Notre Dame fan, I wanted to see Sam Hartman go out there and do well. But other than that, my eyes were glued on the wide receiver and cornerback battles, on the trench battles. Those are always a lot of fun. But yeah, tonight Drake and I are going to talk about 8 different players that we think realistically could be on the Indianapolis Colts next year that stood out, and really had a good week, maybe boosted their draft stock, or at least we think it probably impressed the brass for the Colts this week down in Mobile, Alabama. But before we do that, please, guys, go follow us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts on FN on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know when Drake and I go live every Monday and Thursday night, so you never miss an episode. And if you can't catch us live, no worries. Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're on there as well. So make sure you subscribe, give us a 5-star review so we can reach other Colts fans just like you. Patrick is already in the chat. We were a few minutes late. That's my bad, not Drake's, but he says, assuming it's because Drake is mixing a double. Hey, Drake might have had a double. He usually does 50-50. So
always
more than a double usually. So thanks. Good to see you, Patrick. We got Sean in the chat. Hey guys, excited about tonight's podcast. Thank you so much, Sean. Excited to have you on board, and we're getting it started out hot with the super sticker from Stormy Hellbrook. If you guys don't know Stormy, that's Drake's mom. So hey, thank you so much for all the support. I saw some pictures of your mom at your baby shower, Drake, and she was getting you some different things for the baby. Saw that. So hey, always appreciate your support as always. So Drake, let's dive right in, buddy, because we've got a lot to talk about tonight. We got to talk about all the standouts from the Senior Bowl. And immediately I want to go to the cornerback position, Drake, because it could be one of the positions that the Colts are considering in round 1. Yes, Juju Brents played really well. Jalen Jones showed that he has starter potential, but are they really set at the cornerback position? Who knows? I think Chris Ballard and that group are still looking at that position and wanting to, number one, get more explosive, maybe find guys with more ball skills, and really just to kind of create competition for such a young group that is going to be vital, not only for 2024, but for years down the line for this team.
Yeah, and look, it's one of the youngest parts of the defense. It's one of the youngest parts of the roster for the Colts, and this is overall a freaking young roster from top to bottom. Okay, and it was a dare I say it. Look, we have to be brutally honest as analysts here. It was a liability at times. Okay, for the Indianapolis Colts when Juju Brents wasn't playing. Dallas Flowers goes down. Oh my goodness! Then you've got Daryl Baker Jr. out there. You've got guys like Tony Brown who it'll go down as potentially the worst showing I've ever seen as a defensive back. And that's no offense to Tony Brown. He is strictly a special teams ace, I think. But yeah, I mean, if just to give everybody perspective, I mean, so many people have mocked, the first round pick for the Colts to get a defensive back, to continue to build that secondary, to continue to build rapport with Gus Bradley's defense and guys like Juju Brents and guys like Jalen Jones, and even Jalen Jones. He's not even a solidified starter. Okay, there at the end of the season, he kind of struggled at times. He started to get exposed a little bit. So, absolutely, this is a position of need, and they still need a starting level cornerback to help Juju Brents and to help Kenny Moore if he does get re-signed.
Yeah, I would agree. Drake, we've got a challenge here for you, buddy. Stormy saying, I'll donate another 10 if Drake drinks a double live. I don't know if Drake is wanting to down his entire drink, but hey, the if we're getting another 10,
heavy. You can still see the top
heavy.
of it.
Yeah, you can. But we'll have to see there. But Drake, yeah, I fully agree, and I think this cornerback class, there's definitely some debate about who the top corner in this draft class is, and there's going to be debate about that up until draft night. But a guy that I think really staked his claim for that this week was Quinyon Mitchell, the cornerback out of Toledo. I mean, my goodness, Drake, watching him in practice this week, he's got a claim for the best defensive player at the Senior Bowl, bar none. I mean, he was making plays all over the field. He was like a magnet to wide receivers. I think the only time I ever saw him, a wide receiver, break him off on a route was because he slipped down. He slipped and fell down. It wasn't because there was anything wrong with this technique, but he's a big, strong, long cornerback that really showed off some ball skills. Intercepted 2 passes in practice, and boy, if I'm the Indianapolis Colts, that's exactly the type of cornerback that I want to see on my team.
Yeah, and he's starting to break away as a legitimate like top 5, potentially even top 3 corner. I mean, if we're gonna go based off the Senior Bowl practice week, this dude shined. I mean, he was fantastic. He was like glue. He was stuck to the receivers, which is what the Colts need. They need a guy like that. And guess what? He can also play in the zone. Okay, he can do everything as a cornerback, and he comes from a small school, which I mean, a lot of times these guys that come from schools like Toledo, I think, what conference? Yeah, that's the MAC conference, the Mid-Atlantic Conference. I mean, people aren't talking about, a lot of prospects coming out of that conference. They just aren't. So the fact that he's a Toledo Rocket and he's over here as a top 5 potential cornerback, that's fantastic. And honestly, I know we've talked about Kool-Aid McKinstry. I know we've talked about Nate Wiggins and all those guys, from Clemson and from Alabama. But man, he is starting to look like he would be a perfect fit in Gus Bradley's defense, and like he could really solidify a position long term if, of course, his prospect rank and the way he's playing pans out for his NFL career. So I loved him. I loved watching him play. Like you said, a couple times he slipped, or maybe once I think he got beat on a route. But other than that, man, this dude was about as efficient as you can ask a cornerback to be.
Absolutely. I mean, you just look at his body of work in there, and I think he was probably, a lot of scouts were pegging him to late first round. I mean, he's probably now, I would say, top 20 prospect in this draft class, and I could say that confidently. Patrick has a comment here and he says his only posted 40 time isn't great, but he could improve that at the combine, and his Senior Bowl performance could shoot him up the board. So yeah, I do agree with that. The 40 time, I was listening to Daniel Jeremiah talk, and they said representatives of the school earlier in the year had clocked him at a 4.39. So if that's accurate, we'll have to see. I mean, we'll see here in a month when he takes the field at the combine. But if he's got 4.3 speed, I mean, shoot, that's going to make him even more enticing. But Drake, looking at him as far as his fit with the Colts, I mean, really good in off coverage, really good zone, a guy that can be that really, when watching his film, he has really good eyes. You know, he can definitely get to or read the quarterback. He can break on the ball very quickly, and then in press coverage too. He's a big, strong, physical cornerback, so it's hard for wide receivers to really break away at the line of scrimmage when he is in press. So he can really do it all. But because he's so strong in that zone coverage, and then has the speed to kind of to react and catch back up to other wide receivers if need be. That's why I think he's more of, he's really a perfect fit for what Gus Bradley wants to do in kind of that man match scheme, where you start out in zone, and then as soon as a wide receiver enters that zone, that's kind of your man. Then you match up with him, and you suddenly go into man coverage. So I think he would be a perfect fit. And really, if I had to choose right now of a guy that is likely to be available there at 15 and that the Colts are really going to fall in love with, it's probably Quinyon Mitchell.
Yeah, and like you said, they need a guy who's versatile. All right, they don't need a one-trick pony anymore. They need to solidify this secondary, because I know that there wasn't constant pass pressure from the Colts, but that secondary was probably, safeties and cornerbacks included, the most just devastating liability for that defense. And it showed that they need depth, and they need young talent and young starting talent. And so far, Quinyon Mitchell looks like he might be that guy if he does fall to the Colts and if they get a chance to get him.
I agree. And there's really strong corners in this class, like Terry and Arnold, Nate Wiggins, potentially Cooper DeJean. All of those guys are going to be in the mix along with Quinyon Mitchell. And the combine is going to help tell a lot of that when you get full testing numbers on these guys as well. It's going to be a very, very important position to watch for the Indianapolis Colts this fall. This spring, excuse me. Shout out to Truitt for his super sticker. He said, late intense Madden game. Let's move on.
I get it.
Truitt, you're I'm glad you're using that Madden game that you won and getting on the sticks, brother. Hopefully you're kicking some butt. Hopefully you're leading the Colts to a Super Bowl and franchise mode. You'll love to see it. So, but Drake, let's talk about another cornerback. This guy, I'm not really thinking of him as a day one, day two guy. He might be in day three. This might be a type of player that the Colts kind of take a shot on, but he's going to provide really good quality depth for you. And that's cornerback Cam Hart from Notre Dame. He really had a solid week of practice. He one of the biggest question marks was does he have the speed to stick with the receivers? How's he going to be able to handle some of the better route runners? And watching him in practice, he handled all of that just fine. So it seemed like as the week went on, Cam Hart got stronger and stronger going up against higher level competition.
Yeah, and if you on X followed guys like Destin Adams or our own Jake Arthur or our own Shad McGinnis, I mean, pretty much unanimously they were talking about Cam Hart and just how kind of we were talking about Quinyon Mitchell. He was sticking to these receivers. He wasn't giving them any chance in one-on-ones. I mean, he was showing physicality. He was showing ability to cover. He was showing perhaps better than expected speed. Now, it's not going to be lightning quick, but neither is Juju Brents. Neither is Jalen Jones. Okay, so you don't necessarily need super fast corners. You probably want one, but like you said, he's not going to be a first rounder, probably not even a second rounder. More than likely, he's going to be like a fourth rounder, maybe a third rounder at best, and he could be a big value pick. You know, he could be kind of what you thought and hoped that Darius Rush was going to be. Okay, only I think that he fits the scheme better, and I think that he showed in the Senior Bowl practices that he might be better than everybody thought he would be.
Exactly. Bigger guy too. 6'2", close to 200 pounds. So he's not going to be easily moved. Okay. He's a bigger, strong, physical corner. You guys noticing a pattern here when I'm talking about cornerbacks that the Colts like? I mean, hell, look at Juju Brent, 6'3", over 200 pounds, really long arms, and a physical guy. That's what the Colts like in their cornerbacks. So they just need more guys with that really long game speed, and that's where Quinyon Mitchell comes in, especially if he runs in the 4.3 range. But yeah, I thought Cam Hart was really impressive this week. Certainly answered some questions I had about him, and I think he kind of solidified himself as probably an early day 3 pick, 4th, 5th round, someone that the Colts could potentially take a shot on, start out on special teams and provide some quality depth, because you guys remember the Colts were down to at times Darrell Baker Jr. on one side, Tony Brown had to fill in at times, so the depth at cornerback was definitely tested this year. There was a lot of injuries, and so you kind of have to prepare for that this season again. You got to make sure that the depth at the cornerback position is much better than it was last season, because I think that was one of the areas that really hurt the Colts. Let's move off the cornerback position and let's talk about edge rusher, because edge rusher I think is also a potential need for this team. And boy, Drake, there were quite a few that stood out, but I want to talk about Laiatu Latu, who could potentially be the pick at 15, just like Quinyon Mitchell. And I know there's some concerns about his medicals, and that will all get checked out at the combine. But man, watching him in practice, especially in those one-on-ones, going up against other offensive tackles, some tackles that are projected to be top 20 picks, and he made such quick work out of him, Drake. He just seems so polished as a pass rusher. He's not coming in with just one move. He has multiple moves that he can use. He has a chop move. He's got a spin move. He's got a rip move, and he's able to use those as counters too. That's something that a young player coming into the NFL usually doesn't have right away. They have one move and then they can kind of get stuck, and they try to rely on their athleticism to get them out of that. Not Latu. I mean, he got stuck and he immediately went to a counter move and was able to get right around the offensive tackle. He impressed me quite a bit this week. And I know Stats Matt, who just joined, Latu is one of his favorite guys as well. Stats Matt, you had a week. Latu was very impressive.
Yeah, and you're talking about a guy that, yes, okay, in 2019 and 2020, you look at his stats on if you take a gander at him, they're kind of sparse, right? But let's go with the positives here. He bounced back like a madman. Okay, I mean, this dude was the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. Okay, I want to look at those kind of accolades. And he also had 2 freaking interceptions in 2023 as a defensive end and a guy on the front. Honestly, I'm just going to say it, and I know you'll agree with me. He looks kind of like Quinyon Mitchell. He looks like he would be just a perfect fit for what the Colts are trying to do. And you also, dare I say it, you need a guy to push Kwity Paye. You need to put a fire underneath Kwity Paye. I know he's a great run defender, but he doesn't put enough pressure on the passer. I mean, Tyquan Lewis out-pressured him by 16 pressures this year. Okay, so you can't have that happen with a guy who is behind you on the depth chart. All right. So I think that this is a great fit for the Colts. If he's there, and a guy like Brock Bowers, who will probably be gone, I know you and I kind of hope he's going to fall, but if 15 rolls around and Laiatu's sitting there, you might want to take him. And I know everyone's been talking about Jared Verse. I don't know if he is even as complete as Laiatu is. I mean, this dude he looks fantastic. He can stop the run. He can put pressure on the quarterback. Like you said, if he gets stuck, he continues with different moves. He doesn't just try to continue to push with his athleticism. That doesn't work in the NFL. All right. A lot of times it's just not going to work against the pros, especially guys like Laramie Tunsil, who are, by the way, in your freaking division. So I'm all about Laiatu. I think that if everyone else that might be before him on the Colts board is gone by the time they pick, man, he would be a perfect fit. And I honestly think he could push to start.
What was one thing that we talked about, I think it was last week, when we talked about the defensive line for the Indianapolis Colts and how they need to take that next step to be elite.
Yeah.
They didn't get enough pressure consistently on the quarterback. Well, let's look at some stats from Laiatu last season for this kid out of UCLA. So last year he ranked second in the FBS, which is Division I football, in total pressures with 57 and pressure rate at 20.4%. So literally 1/5 of the snaps he took on defense, he was getting pressure on the quarterback. The year before that, Laiatu led the FBS, ranked first with 55 pressures and a 19.1% pressure rate. So he ranked first and then dropped down to second, but he actually had more pressures and a higher pressure rate last year than he did 2 years ago. So this kid is continuing to get better and better. What's going to be key is the medicals. The medicals are going to be so key for Latu. Because when he suffered that neck injury when he was at Washington, the doctors medically retired him. Said if you play football, there's a high chance that you could seriously hurt yourself and have worse issues than just your football career ending. So that's going to be the huge thing. It's how are the medicals going to look, and if they're cleared and there's no issues, then I think Latu's going to be a top 15 pick. If not, then you could see him fall. But watching him on the field, watching his film, watching him go up against some of the best that the college football landscape has to offer at the Senior Bowl and those offensive tackles, I mean, he was absolutely dominating out there. Like I said, the multiple moves, getting consistent pressure on the quarterback, that's what the Colts need out of an edge rusher. And if it's not going to be Kwity Paye, Latu could probably step in and start close to day one. I mean, he probably needs to work on his run defense a little bit, so he might take a back seat there. But hey, I mean, the kid is oozing with potential.
Yeah, and look, I understand the medicals. I understand kind of the fear with that, and you wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't look deeper into that. Okay,
Right.
But the thing is, the guy just looks like he fits with what the Colts are trying to do, and we're not saying Kwity Paye can't turn into that guy who gets 10 sacks, can't turn into that guy who gets, consistent pass pressure. Look, if we're talking complete talent on the defensive front, Samson Ebukam, I think, really could push Kwity Paye at this point for consideration for the best all around, defensive front member, if you want to call them that. But Kwity Paye he's a well-rounded guy. He's a well-rounded football player. He stops the run. He can get it done. He really showed what Yannick Ngakoue could not. And I even think he gets after the passer better than Yannick does at times. Because when Yannick went to Chicago, he was nothing. Okay, so Kwity Paye still has a chance here. And they need to decide if they're going to keep his fifth-year option. Okay, so this is a big year for Kwity Paye. Not saying you need to go out there and select a defensive end strictly to push your former first-round draft pick. But if the war room decides we need more pass rush, we need a future pass rusher that could be a future star, man, Laiatu is starting to, at least he showed it in Senior Bowl week, that he might be a legitimate starter at some point, and a great one at that. If it all pans out, we can only live in the moment right now. But in this moment, he looked freaking fantastic and maybe even better than anybody else during Senior Bowl week.
Yeah, I would agree. Shout out to my beautiful pregnant wife Danielle for her super sticker on the evening. When last time I checked, she was just chilling on the couch. It was a long day teaching 5-year-olds. Apparently, one of her 5-year-olds said that the fish started with the letter M. So definitely a day for my wife in the kindergarten classroom. But thank you so much for all of your support, as always. I had to throw some humor in.
Hilarious.
There, let's talk about another pass rusher here, Drake. This guy, I think, probably second round, maybe third round. We'll have to see. But a guy that shows some real intensity, and that's Chris Braswell. I think coming into the league, he would probably be a pure pass rusher. He would have to definitely develop against the run game, but what really stood out was his aggressiveness and his high motor on running plays. So it's not like he just doesn't play the run at all and is only going after pass rusher. He just needs to work on his technique, and I think that could be helped with NFL coaching. But the pass rushing skill set is there. He was getting consistent pressure on the quarterbacks there. You could tell he had a really high motor and was really taking things seriously. Chris Braswell, again, a freak athlete. He's going to test out of the building when we get to the combine in Indy in just a few short weeks, but he definitely has some potential there. And it will be interesting to see if the Colts fall in love with his athletic ability and his upside. He could be a guy on day 2 that the Colts seriously consider.
Yeah, and I think if 15 rolls around, right, and let's say hypothetically, Brock Bowers falls, or they get a cornerback, or they pick a wide receiver, which honestly, we need to be real. They probably need a playmaker on offense or a cornerback more than they need a pass rusher.
I would agree.
But I will say that if you don't see Laiatu picked, or you don't see a guy like Jared Verse picked, Braswell could be the next guy. Okay. He could be a second, third rounder. Like you said, day two, he could be a guy that they think maybe long term could be a solid piece. Okay. And, worst case scenario, he becomes a depth rusher with ridiculous athletic talent. Okay. So at the Senior Bowl or at Senior Bowl practice, though, there was pretty much all of that put on display. I do think he might be a little bit smaller from the side, like from the aspect of weight, because he's like 230 pounds, I think, or something like that. So he's going to rely a lot more on his athleticism. Like we talked about Laiatu, countering and doing spins and doing, chops and doing swim moves and all this other stuff and just dismissing the arms. Braswell's probably going to do what we said you probably shouldn't do, and he's probably going to rely a little more on that athleticism. Now, they did just let Nate Ollie go, and me and you think that was probably for fundamentals, okay? So maybe the next guy they bring in as the D-line coach could help a guy like Braswell get past just trying to use his sheer athleticism, because that's what a lot of college players at any position do in their first year in the NFL. And you got to break them of that habit, because technique beats athleticism a lot of the times in the pros. So I think that he would be a nice depth fit. I think that he would potentially at the highest point, maybe he could be like a guy that rotates in like Dio Dangbo did during the 2023 season, grabs 8.5 sacks. That's fantastic, if he does something like that. So I was impressed, though. A lot of times that athleticism, man, you know what? If you can get the technique better, he could be a problem, as a pass rusher in the NFL, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be key to see who the Colts do end up hiring as their new defensive line coach, who's going to be trusted with developing these guys, putting these guys in the best position to succeed. But Braswell could be a pick on day two because of his athleticism, his ability to get after the quarterback, pressure the quarterback. That's something that isn't lost on this Indianapolis Colts front office. So it's going to be very interesting. I think if you're looking at a guy like Latu or Verse, if they're drafted in the first round by the Colts, I think that's going to be a really big indicator that the Colts are not going to pick up Kwity Paye's fifth-year option. If they're using that high of draft capital on their next edge rusher, and I understand you can never have enough pass rushers, but when you're drafting a guy in the first round, you're expecting him to be the starter. Yeah. So if Latu is drafted there, that's probably an indication Kwity Paye's fifth-year option isn't going to get picked up. If the Colts don't go edge rush early or even skip on a guy like Braswell in rounds 2 or 3 and end up choosing to draft maybe an edge rusher in the later rounds, I think there's a higher chance that Kwity Paye's fifth-year option does get picked up. We'll just have to kind of see how that all plays out. So let's switch gears, Drake. We talked about defense for our first two positions. Let's go to offense and talk wide receivers. So there were some wide receivers that stood out, namely Roman Wilson of Michigan. But the reason we're not going to talk too much about him is because I don't know, Roman Wilson just doesn't fit what the Colts need at the wide receiver position. They need guys that are better route runners and have that explosiveness down the field. And a guy that I honestly stood out was wide receiver Ricky Pearsall from Florida. Guys, from Florida, he's got a connection to Anthony Richardson, a teammate with Anthony Richardson in college. Both of them still have a really good relationship. Some of our friends, Noah Compton over there at the Blue Stable, I think it was either him or Jay Robbins that reported that, or even our own Jake Arthur. One of the guys reported that Anthony Richardson was actually texting Ricky Pearsall through the Senior Bowl, asking how he was doing, pumping him up, trying to give him some encouragement throughout the week. And Pearsall said, hey, I would love to play with Anthony Richardson again. So there is that connection there. We'll see if it does play out that way. But Pearsall, with his route running, showed really good hands all throughout the week and was able to create quite a bit of separation on the cornerbacks that he faced for most of the week. So I thought Pearsall really helped himself, Drake.
Yeah, and we talked about, he's probably not going to test very high with, the RAS score, the relative athletic score, and that's something that Chris Ballard really likes to value when
Right.
he's picking draft picks. But man, I know that this might not be the same comp because of the size difference, because Pearsall is like about 6'1", 200 pounds. But man, it's almost feeling like Hunter Renfrow to me, because like when you look at the way that he tested, he wasn't ridiculously athletic, but the dude had 103 catches in a season. He was a safety blanket, and then the wheels fell off of the whole Raiders franchise, and they forgot how to utilize the guy. I think that if Pearsall can continue to run routes like that, man, getting open is valued. Okay, you can throw athleticism out of the door. If you get open in the NFL, you will be valued. And I'm telling you, you got a guy like that knows Richardson, and then a guy like Josh Downs that knows Richardson, and a guy like Michael Pittman, and maybe another outside guy with Pierce. Man, that's a recipe. That's a crazy recipe for a defensive coach to try to solve, because then you're dealing with a couple guys that can get open in the slot. And I think that Pearsall is more of a slot guy. So he definitely rose his stock a little bit. And like you said, we were hearing everybody or watching everybody report on Pearsall. We just talked about his relationship with Anthony Richardson. Well, it's past that now. He actually showcased some serious route running ability, which will get you a spot in the NFL. If you can get open, man, somebody's going to pick you up.
Right. Shout out to NFL Nerd for his super chat of the evening. NFL Nerd says he's giving it on behalf of Stats Matt for keeping us honest
Take
in
a drink,
the
Stats.
chat. So yeah, take a drink, Stats Matt. Thank you, NFL Nerd, for donating money to Drake and I in honor of Stats Matt. Hey, Stats Matt, I'll next time I see you, buddy, I'll buy you a beer to comp for the money that none of the money that Stats Matt ends up getting for this show. But hey, thanks. We really appreciate it, buddy, and appreciate you, NFL Nerd, for all that you bring to the show each and every week. We really appreciate it. But Drake, I agree. And when you were talking about that Hunter Renfrow comparison, I thought that was spot on. Really good route runner who can get in and out of his breaks quickly, has good hands. That's Ricky Pearsall. And we talk about needing that deep threat. Well, behind Josh Downs, the Colts don't really have a quick win wide receiver either. Isaiah McKenzie is likely gone. They're back up in the slot. Who's that going to be? Ashton Doolin doesn't really fit a slot wide receiver. He's more of that deep threat type of guy that could back up an Alec Pierce or a Michael Pittman on the outside. But a quick win guy in the slot, I think Ricky Pearsall would be that guy. Could be a good backup, play special teams, and contribute in a variety of different ways. So it's not going to be a guy that you take in the top 3 rounds. You're probably looking at a 4th round pick for Pearsall, and I think that's probably where the Colts would look at him. 4th, 5th round, early on day 3, a guy that can contribute on special teams but add really quality depth to your lineup. I think that would be Ricky Pearsall and really be a good fit there. The other wide receiver that really caught my eye, Drake, South Carolina's Xavier Legette. We talked about him on Monday as being a guy to watch. Came in, and I apologize. I told you that he was 6'3". You had the measurements on the spot. I was wrong. He came in at 6'1". So a lot smaller than people expected. And that first Tuesday, didn't have the best day, mostly because of the quarterbacks throwing him the football. Really didn't have a chance to prove it, but he certainly picked it up, and he showed what makes him such an enticing prospect: the physicality, being able to win deep, being able to win short. He's got good leaping ability, good yards after catch ability, something that the Colts really need: a wide receiver that can win after they get the ball in their hands and be a yak champion, or some guy that can take a ball on a 5 to 10 yard route and instead turn it into a 20 to 25 yard gain.
Yeah, and like you said, he's more of the long stride speed. He's not this dude who's like, just going to burn the crap out of you like a Tyreek Hill or something. But, when you're 200, when you see his measurements, 6'1", 220 pounds or close to that, that's almost like a running back build. To put that at wide receiver, That is interesting to have to cover. That's a guy that potentially could be more athletic than safeties, and he could be a mismatch for cornerbacks that aren't physical enough to keep him in place or to match that physicality. And a guy that's like long and rangy might have issues covering him. I mean, he's kind of a mystic prospect because the athleticism's all there. You
Mhm.
know, the build is all there. But he's 6'1", and you're kind of asking, will he be able to succeed in the NFL? Well, I think he can. And I think that if Shane Steichen gets his hands on him, look, I know we cover the Colts, but Shane Steichen knows ball. He knows offensive football. He knows the strengths and weaknesses of his players. That's why you saw him damn near get to the playoffs with Gardner freaking Minshew and basically
Hey,
Michael Pittman
listen,
Jr.
Pro Bowl Gardner Minshew. Throw some
Bro,
respect. Although
excuse me.
throw some respect on his name.
Excuse me, Pro Bowler Gardner Minshew. Yeah, but look, I think that Legette has an interesting place with the Colts. If they do pick him, I think that he has a very intriguing fit in Shane Steichen's offense because he could be a downfield threat. But like you said, he could also be that very deceivingly quick, yak receiver that the Colts definitely needed. And they really didn't have it because Pittman's not that guy. Downs is more of the slot variety. He did have a little bit of that ability. He's not going to beat you in a foot race more often than not. And Alec Pierce is the deep threat. So they don't really have that guy. That's an intriguing draft selection for me. And I think that, I don't know about you, but I think he would probably fall maybe I think at the highest he'd go like third round. At the lowest, I think you might be able to pick him up in the fifth round. I think that he's going to be one of, between the third and fifth round if I'm, throwing my opinion out there.
Yeah, I think he's probably at this point a late day 2 pick. Probably third round is where you're going to see him taken if the draft was tomorrow. It's going to be I think what's going to be huge for Legette is the combine, showing his his athletic testing numbers. That's what's really going to be big. I think another area that he certainly could probably improve on is route running. He doesn't create too much separation from what I have seen. But I think it's there. I think he can do that. But really, that's what I'm going to be kind of really looking forward to is seeing how he performs at the combine, seeing his testing numbers, to see just kind of how the type of athlete he is, because the Colts, they really have to have like a 9.0 relative athletic score. Otherwise, it just doesn't seem like the Colts are interested in taking guys that aren't elite athletes. So it's going to be big to see what he ends up doing at the combine here at the end of February and early March. Let's move to our final position of the evening, Drake, and that's defensive tackle. And yes, we know the Colts have DeForest Buckner. Grover Stewart is likely to be re-signed on another long-term extension, but behind that, you don't really have much, and when Grover Stewart went out with that 6-game suspension, it was like the Red Sea parted at times, and teams could just run all day right up the middle. So you need to kind of get some depth at that defensive tackle position, especially if that one technique, the guy right behind Grover Stewart. I think that is going to be very key for this Colts team. And one of the guys that could do that, a guy that I think is probably going to go a little bit higher than when the Colts are looking, but man, he sure showed explosiveness from a guy his size, T'Vondre Sweat out of Texas. Drake, what did you see out of this dude this week, and just how impressive he was for a guy that is I think he's 360 pounds is what he weighed in at. Just an absurd size for a human being, especially with how he moves.
Yeah, I absolutely love the idea of him being an Indianapolis Colt. I think that when you watched him, there was a video I saw where which it's not even a stat for a defensive player, but he pancaked in one-on-ones a center, I believe it was. I mean, he just shoved him over. So T'Vondre Sweat, man, for 360 pounds, this dude's a freaking athletic monster. I mean, he will stop the run. He will attract double teams. Can you imagine if Grover Stewart goes out, DeForest Buckner's in there, here comes Sweat? You're not even missing a beat. You're just not. Okay, this is a guy that he has first round potential, late first round potential. I don't think he's going to go in the first round, But if the Colts really feel like they need to solidify that defensive tackle depth, man, that would be an awesome pick, because as we saw when Stewart was out of there, I think you had guys like Eric Johnson, you had guys like Taven Bryan, just they don't cut it in the ground game. And I even wrote a piece recently where it was kind of crazy. Taven Bryan was a pass rushing specialist, had 2 sacks in his first 3 games, and then after that, not a single sack. So he actually underwhelmed in the area that he excels in. Okay, so I think that Sweat, I don't think he's going to be an Indianapolis Colt, if I'm being honest, but that would be one hell of a pick if they were able to get him, if he falls like to the 2nd, 3rd round and they really feel like they need depth.
Yeah, and if the Colts don't re-sign Grover Stewart, then that nose tackle position takes a huge jump in priority, and you could be looking at Sweat in the 2nd round. I want to give a shout out to Carriage House here for his super chat. Thank you so much for all of your support, buddy. Really appreciate it. Carriage House says, Pro Bowler Gardner Minshew. How much does that add to his value? And what's in the cup? I'm late. So Drake's taking his drink right there. We were going to talk about this a little bit later, but we might as well take care of it now. But Drake, when I wrote a piece about that this week when Gardner Minshew was elected to the Pro Bowl, first of his career, I think that adds at least a couple $1 million each year onto his next deal. So say if the Colts were looking to re-sign him for a 1-year $7 million deal, I think that probably goes up to probably a 1-year $10 million deal. Honestly, I think it's that important because he can go out there and say, I'm a Pro Bowl level quarterback. So that definitely is going to hold some weight, not only with what they can say, but other teams are going to go out and say, like, look, he whatever you want to say, he did make the Pro Bowl. He did help the Colts get just a couple of plays away from the playoffs. So I think it definitely increases the value of what Gardner Minshew is going to be asking and commanding on the open market.
Yeah, and he is still one of the best backups in the NFL, and he had a dirt money contract based even off of backup standards in 2023. So I would say if they do re-sign him, it's going to be a 1 at the most 2-year contract, but we're talking probably between the $8 and $10 million range. And honestly, I think Spotrac had his market value at like 5.5. That is not accurate. He's going to make more than that. And I think if it's over like $6 million, I don't think the Colts are going to pay him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. Personally, I don't think that if he's asking for $10 million, the Colts aren't going. Minshew will not be back with the Colts. They will go a different direction. Hell, they may go a different direction regardless, because it seemed like how Shane Steichen and how Chris Ballard were talking doesn't really sound like it's likely Gardner Minshew returns. They were speaking in the past tense. We're grateful he was on our team this year. Chris Ballard talked about how Gardner Minshew would like to go somewhere with the opportunity to start. That's obviously not going to be in Indianapolis because Anthony Richardson is this franchise. So I would be, at this point, I'd be surprised if Gardner Minshew does return with the Indianapolis Colts. But Carriage House, thank you so much for your support, buddy. Good question. And like I said, really, really appreciate everything that you do for Drake and I. So Drake, let's talk about the final player that stood out, the final defensive tackle. This was another one of your guys that you were very, very high on for his performance this week. Defensive tackle out of Florida State, Braden Fiske. Tell me what you like about this guy.
I just love the way that he just has like a complete repertoire of skill set. When it comes to the defensive tackle position, this is a guy that was at Western Michigan, did fantastic work, and then he transfers over to Florida State, doesn't even freaking miss a beat against far better competition. But it was really what you saw in the one-on-ones, kind of going back to Laiatu. Now, he's not Laiatu, but he keeps you guessing, okay? And he can bring the pressure. He can stop the run. This is a guy that had 21 tackles for loss over the last 2 years of his college career at 2 completely different schools in 2 completely different conferences, and they're different levels of competition. All right, so this is a guy that I don't think it matters who you put in front of him. I think he's going to produce, and I think that he's going to fall a little bit. I think that initially before this Senior Bowl week, he probably was like at the highest, like a 3rd, 4th round pick. I think that his stock went up. I think that he's definitely warranted a little bit more attention. But man, if the Colts are looking for a guy and they're not willing to, and they do re-sign Stewart, I don't think that they're going to get sweat if they re-sign Stewart. I think though that Fiske would be a perfect depth piece, and hell, for all you know, he might even be a guy that you rotate in with Grover Stewart, because you're not going to miss a beat with this guy. He's athletic, he's quick enough on the defensive interior, and he's going to provide a smorgasbord of different things on that front that the Colts were missing when Stewart was gone.
I think really for me, it was one word that stood out when I was watching Fiske all week: explosive. You know,
Yeah.
he was just so explosive off the ball. That first step, really attacking those interior offensive linemen that he was going up against in those one-on-one drills. And guys, those one-on-one drills really hold importance to the scouts and everybody there at the Senior Bowl. That's some of the most watched activities of all practices, those one-on-ones between the defensive linemen and the offensive linemen. You know, and it just seemed like he was so quick off the ball all the time. Sure, he lost some reps, but more often than not, he was getting leverage and pushing guys into the backfield. So yeah, I think he definitely helped his stock as well. Again, going to come down to some testing numbers. We'll see how he performs at the combine, what kind of athlete he ends up testing out to be. But it's definitely intriguing. I think he could be a mid-round option for the Indianapolis Colts. Someone that could be a backup to Grover Stewart would certainly help a lot in the running game, and potentially, like you said, come in to spell Grover Stewart if Grover Stewart gets hurt or whatever. Come in on some passing downs, even in some of the sub packages. But yeah, I'm going to be Fiske is a guy that I'm going to keep a close eye on throughout the rest of this process, through the combine. Probably watch some more tape on him as well, get a little bit more familiar with his game. That could definitely be a name, especially if he tests as a high level athlete, a name to watch for the Indianapolis Colts. So
Yeah.
Drake, Senior Bowl week, I thought it was a fantastic look at a lot of different guys. I think they obviously do a great job every year, but especially this year, they had a lot of really good athletes down there. So it makes sense why Chris Ballard, Shane Steichen, Ed Dodds, really the whole brass for the Colts were down there to really get their a good look in person at these guys going up against quality competition. I think you learned quite a bit about some guys, especially those guys at the top, Latu and Mitchell. I would probably put them in my top 5 right now easily for potential picks at that number 15 spot for the Colts.
Yeah, and it's a toss up at this point, because like we've just absolutely hammered home, is last year you knew what position they were going to draft. Well, this
Right.
year you don't. There's 3 needs, and now I think in order of importance, I honestly think it's wide receiver, cornerback. You could really interchange those 2, and then it's defensive edge rusher. So it's going to be one of those 3, though. They're not going to take a tackle. They're not going to take an offensive lineman or anything like that. And I saw Carriage House said, did they say what was in the cup? So it is half cucumber vodka, half ginger ale, with maybe a skosh more vodka than ginger ale. Because look, even though we do cover the Colts here and, we like to have fun, I'm still a man, and I'm not going to stray away from that.
We like to have a good time when we're talking Colts football on Monday and Thursday nights. And Drake, I like what you said about it. It's probably either going to be a wide receiver or a cornerback. I'm sorry, that's wrong. It's going to be Brock Bowers, a tight end out of Georgia. So listen, buddy, we're on the Brock Bowers train. We're going to be the conductor of the Brock Bowers train until it ends up not happening on April 25th. But hey, if it does, I think Drake and I are still planning on doing a live stream that night, because I'm not going to the draft this year because my wife could go into labor at any moment during the draft weekend. So I will not be live at the draft like I was last year. But hey, if Brock Bowers goes, I might have a little party at my house if that ends up happening. So we'll just have to see. But Drake, let's talk about the latest Colts news and rumors here and let the people get out of here. And really, there was only one thing to discuss this week, and it was the Colts added 3 Pro Bowlers to the AFC roster. DeForest Buckner heading to Orlando for the 3rd time in his career, very well deserved. Ryan Kelly for the 4th time, another one very well deserved. And the surprise that really shocked the football world, Gardner Minshew getting selected to his first Pro Bowl. All of them joining Quentin Nelson down there for the Pro Bowl games that I think are kicking off at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock Eastern. So they might have already been kicking off tonight on ESPN. But we talked about this in Horseshoe Huddle halftime. But Drake, just give me some thoughts on what are your thoughts on Buckner, Kelly, and Minshew heading down there to the Pro Bowl with Nelson?
You know, Kelly, well, first off, I think DeForest Buckner should have been a Pro Bowler the first round of all this.
I agree.
So DeForest Buckner, very deserving yet again, eight sacks. The guy just continues to be a mainstay of pure, unadulterated reliability. All right, and that's what you need. So he earned it. Ryan Kelly earned it for sure. I think that he had maybe one of his best years in recent memory as far as efficiency on the offensive line. And he's the general of the offensive line. Now, Gardner Minshew, that to me, look, we love the Colts. We cover the team. We try to stay as unbiased as possible. But you and I can agree here. When that happened, I thought it was a joke. And the Colts released a video. This is how serious they're taking it. They released a video of this dude like going, oh, and like freaking doing goat noises. And they had a SpongeBob meme with him. I mean, this dude is going to make, like you said, we were talking about this. He's going to make those players laugh their freaking asses off. All right. So that's going to be somebody to watch during the Pro Bowl games, because he's going to act like he doesn't belong. Okay. Now, by all regards, he probably doesn't belong, but you know what? Give him credit, man. He's going to earn a bigger payday because of it. He did his job. He was a backup quarterback. He was paid, honestly, to help Anthony Richardson develop. And because he knew Shane Steichen's offense better than anybody, which again would help Anthony Richardson hit the ground running quicker. I don't think anybody expected him to just start for the entire season, but hey, he was one throw potentially away from making the playoffs and winning the division. So give him his roses, man. Gardner Minshew, he's a clown. He's awesome. He's good for football. He's definitely a personality in the locker room. And you know what? He's going to grace Orlando, and I think Orlando's going to welcome him.
Yeah, it's I mean, do I think Buckner and Kelly deserve it? Absolutely. Both those guys, Pro Bowl level players, and I thought definitely had a shot, especially Buckner to go in on the first go around. Thought Buckner was snubbed the first go around. Do I think Gardner Minshew deserves a Pro Bowl this year? Probably not, but hey, I mean, good for him. I mean, he comes in, he leads the Colts almost to a playoffs at the quarterback position, just kept the offense afloat. A lot of other quarterbacks that would have came in, the Colts probably would have won maybe 4 games this year. But Gardner Minshew did about as good of a job as a backup could. Sure, he was limited, but there's a reason he's a backup quarterback. He's got limitations, so good for him. I know, like you said, he's going to enjoy his time down there. The AFC is going to enjoy their time with him, having him as a teammate. I think it's going to be a fun time down there, and good for him. Congratulations to Minshew, Buckner, and Kelly for getting into the Pro Bowl. Patrick brings up a good point. Surprised the news and rumors don't include Isaiah Rodgers, who placed a winning player prop bet through a friend on Jonathan Taylor. So great reporting by Nate Atkins of the Indy Star, one of our good friends down there. He released a story today talking about Isaiah Rodgers Sr. and getting a little bit more in depth on how he revealed this to ESPN on Outside the Lines, that he did place I think it was a $1,000 bet through a friend that was down in Florida on, I think it was either Jonathan Taylor to get a touchdown or Jonathan Taylor to reach a certain threshold to get yardage, and he won, and that was part of the investigation. So even though he didn't place the bet, he was the one that funded the bet and got the payoff in return. So again, it just kind of gets back to the whole thing. Like, listen, if you're in the NFL, don't bet on NFL games. It's that simple. I mean, just don't do it, because there's always that risk that you could get away with it. But I mean, you would rather not get caught and then lose out on a full year contract that's going to hurt you a lot more than maybe winning a couple $100 parlay.
Yeah, and I just looked it up, and practice squad players make around, if they're on the practice squad for 18 weeks, they make around $216,000. So everyone, that's the base. Isaiah Rodgers, I know that he was a late round pick. Just don't bet on NFL games. You're making too much money for that crap. So it just goes back to it. Honestly, when I saw that, I was like, damn it, because Isaiah Rodgers, I think with the Eagles, I do think he's going to be a deceivingly good piece in that defense. I think that he had a lot of talent, but yeah, that was that was just one of those things where I'm like, of course, of course, he had to bet on Jonathan Taylor. Which, hey, by all regards, a lot of times, whenever you do bet on the Colts, that is, a player that you put into your parlay usually. So I guess good
Right.
for him.
But listen, I mean, I've told people this for years, especially our good friend Brandon Moses. Don't bet on the Colts because it's just bad juju, especially if you want them to win. Always seems like it takes a terrible turn. So, so that's my feelings on betting against the
That's
Colts.
fair.
But yeah, just if you're in the NFL, just don't bet. Simple as that. You don't need to do it. So, but Senior Bowl week is practically in the books, Drake. The Senior Bowl game will take place on Saturday. I'll definitely be watching that. Not all the players will be participating in it, but there's still going to be some guys out there that it's going to be interesting to watch and just see how they perform. And while the Colts brass will not be there, they'll come home just watch the game on TV. I think they definitely learned a lot this week on some of the prospects, and who knows, some of the guys that we mentioned tonight could very well be Indianapolis Colts come April.
Yeah, and we've talked about it. Look, usually there's like at least under half or over half of the draft picks
Right around
seem
50%.
Exactly. You always look back and you're like, that guy was at the Senior Bowl. That guy was at the Senior Bowl. So fully expect the Colts have 7 picks this year. They don't have 12. Now they could end up with
They have
more
7 right now. Yes,
right now, because Ballard loves to trade back and get those picks. But fully expect multiple names to be guys that we've talked about right here, right now, that were at the Senior Bowl that Shane Steichen, Ed Dodds, and Chris Ballard were probably high on.
Well said. And that's our show for tonight, guys. Really appreciate everybody tuning in to talk the Senior Bowl and Colts football with us. As always, want to give a shout out to our super chats, Stormy, Truitt, my beautiful wife, Danielle, NFL Nerd, and Carriage House. Really appreciate all of your super chats this evening. Drake still has plenty of drink left in there. So if you want to get your super chats in before we go out tonight, please. He's kind of thirsty. So, but if you haven't done so, go follow us on all of our socials. Like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts on FN on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know when Drake and I go live every Monday or Thursday night, or when special breaking news happens, we'll go live that night as well. So make sure you hit that bell to never miss an episode. And if you can't catch us live or on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're on there as well. So make sure you subscribe, give us a 5-star review so we can reach other Colts fans just like you. NFL Nerd says booze it up, Drake. So go ahead and take a drink. And while you're
several O's.
Yeah, several O's. And while you're taking a drink there, you guys, Drake has been absolutely killing it on horseshoehuddle.com. He's been an absolute menace, writing his ass off all week, getting those stories out to you guys, pumping out the content. Go tell the people what they need to check out.
So I did the Colts 5 biggest surprises from the 2023 season. That's just 5 players that coming into the 2023 season, nobody really expected to break out. Then 3 Colts free agents who likely won't be back in 2024. And then 3 forgotten Colts who could contribute in the following season. And that basically is 3 guys who suffered injuries that didn't even play at all, or they played like hardly at all, that if they stay healthy, they might have a big part in Shane Steichen's offense.
Definitely go check those out. For myself, I've got pieces up on the site about Gardner Minshew, DeForest Buckner, and Ryan Kelly heading to the Pro Bowl, and why they all deserve it. Even taking a look at Gardner Minshew and his case for the Pro Bowl. And guys, like I told you, I'm working on a piece to predict what a possible extension could look like for Grover Stewart. Been doing some research, and some of the numbers might be a little bit surprising for you. So that one probably will come out on Monday on horseshoehuddle.com. So make sure you check that out, as well as all the other fantastic writings by our staff on the site. Go follow Drake at DWalster Drake. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL, and we'll be back Monday night to talk more Colts football with you all as the Super Bowl is inching closer, and so is some crucial moves that the Colts are going to need to make. So the offseason is in full swing. Everyone enjoy your weekend, and we'll be seeing you Monday night. Take it easy.